You know what's interesting about success? It's not what most people think it is. And today I want to share something profound with you, something that might just change the trajectory of your entire life. It's about one of the most powerful secrets of success I've learned in my 40-plus years of business. Never tell people what you do. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's strange. Isn't that the opposite of what we're taught? And you'd be right to question it. We live in a world of social media posts, constant self-promotion, and people shouting from the rooftops about their next big move. But let me tell you why this principle is worth its weight in gold. You see, I learned this lesson early in my life, and it cost me nothing to learn it, but it's made me millions. Isn't that fascinating? Some of the most valuable lessons in life don't cost you a penny, but boy, they can make you a fortune if you understand them. Let me share something with you. When I was just starting out, I used to tell everybody everything. I was like a walking, talking billboard of my own intentions. I'm going to do this, I'm going to achieve that, I'm working on this amazing project. Sound familiar? We've all been there. But here's what happens when you tell people what you're going to do. You're spending valuable energy that should be going into actually doing it. It's like having a bucket with a small hole in the bottom. Every time you talk about your plans, a little bit of that precious energy leaks out. And before you know it, you've got an empty bucket and nothing to show for it. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the most successful people you know are often the quietest about their work? They're not the ones posting every little achievement on social media. They're not the ones telling everyone about their next big move. They're too busy making those moves. I remember a gentleman I met years ago. Let's call him Mr. Jones. Nobody knew exactly what Mr. Jones did. He was always well-dressed, always professional, always carried himself with dignity. But he never talked about his work, never bragged about his achievements. Years later, I discovered he owned half the real estate in his town. Half the town, and most people just knew him as the quiet, pleasant man who showed up at the local diner every morning for breakfast. That's power, folks. That's real power. Because success isn't in the telling, it's in the doing. Here's another principle I want you to understand. Words are like seeds. But most people are planting their seeds in the wrong soil. They're throwing them into the winds of casual conversation, scattering them in the barren ground of social media, instead of planting them in the fertile soil of actual work. You've got to ask yourself, do you want to be known for what you say you're going to do or for what you've actually done? There's a world of difference between these two things. Let me share with you what happens when you stop telling people what you do. First, you create mystery. And mystery, my friends, is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. People are naturally drawn to what they can't quite figure out. Second, you conserve energy. Every time you talk about your plans, you're using up mental and emotional energy that could be going into execution. It's like opening the oven door while you're trying to bake a cake. Every time you open that door, you're letting heat escape. And it takes longer for that cake to bake. Third, and this is crucial, you protect yourself from the dream stealers. Oh, you know who I'm talking about. Those well-meaning folks who feel it's their duty to tell you why something won't work. When you don't tell people what you're doing, you don't have to defend your dreams. Isn't that powerful? Now, some of you might be thinking, but Jim, what about networking? What about marketing? What about getting the word out? And these are good questions, but there's a difference between strategic communication and what I call success leakage. Strategic communication is when you're in the right place at the right time, talking to the right people with the right message. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the casual, everyday tendency to broadcast our plans to anyone who will listen. Let me give you a formula. Write this down, it's important. Success is 80% preparation, 20% execution, and 0% talking about it until it's done. 0%. That's right. While others are talking, you should be preparing. While they're broadcasting, you should be building. I learned this from my mentor when I was just starting out. He told me something I'll never forget. He said, Jim, the world is full of people who are going to do something someday. Your job is to be the person who's already done it. Think about that for a moment. The person who's already done it, not the person who's going to do it, not the person who's thinking about doing it, not the person who's telling everyone about what they're going to do. the person who's already done it. And here's what's fascinating about success: it leaves clues. Have you ever noticed that truly successful people often share this quality of discretion? They understand the power of silence. They understand that energy spent talking about success is energy not spent creating success. Let me tell you about two kinds of people. The first kind says, let me tell you what I'm going to do. The second kind says, let me show you what I've done. Which group do you think achieves more? Which group do you think has more credibility? Which group do you think has more success? You see, success is not a moment, it's a process. It's not an announcement, it's an achievement. And achievements don't need announcements. They speak for themselves. I want you to try something. For the next 30 days, I want you to take on a challenge. Don't tell anyone about your plans, not your friends, not your family, unless absolutely necessary, not your colleagues. Just work, prepare, execute. Watch what happens to your productivity. Watch what happens to your focus. Watch what happens to your results. This reminds me of a story about a young man who came to me for advice many years ago. He was full of dreams, full of plans, full of enthusiasm. He would tell anyone who would listen about his big ideas, his future success, his upcoming ventures. One day I sat him down and shared this principle with him. But Jim, he said, how will people know what I'm capable of if I don't tell them? I told him, what I'm telling you now, they'll know by what you achieve, not by what you say you'll achieve. Success has its own voice, and it's louder than any announcement you could ever make. Would you like to know what happened to that young man? He took my advice. He stopped talking about what he was going to do and started focusing all that energy on actually doing it. Today he runs a company that generates 9 figures in revenue annually. And the interesting thing, most people in his industry still don't know much about him personally. They just know his results. This brings me to another crucial point about success. Success is not about recognition, it's about results. Let me say that again because it's important. Success is not about recognition, it's about results. In our social media age, we've got this backward. We think success is about likes, shares, comments, and followers. But real success, the kind that builds empires, creates wealth, and changes lives, often happens quietly, behind the scenes, away from the spotlight. Think about the most successful people you know personally. Not celebrities, not social media stars, but real successful people in your community. How many of them are constantly telling everyone about their plans? How many of them are always broadcasting their next move? Very few, if any, I'd imagine. Would you like to know why? Because they understand something fundamental about success. The energy you spend telling people about what you're going to do is energy you're not spending on actually doing it. Let me give you another principle to write down. The volume of your work should be louder than the volume of your words. Read that again. The volume of your work should be louder than the volume of your words. You see, when you're constantly telling people what you do, you're creating expectations. And expectations are like debt. They have to be paid back with results. But when you focus on the work first, when you let your achievements speak for themselves, you're operating from a position of surplus, not debt. Now let me share something fascinating with you about human psychology. When you tell people your plans, something interesting happens in your brain. Scientists call it premature sense of completeness. Your mind actually experiences a similar satisfaction to having accomplished the goal just by talking about it. Isn't that incredible? And incredibly dangerous. You see, every time you talk about what you're going to do, your brain gets a little hit of dopamine, that feel-good chemical. It's like your mind is cashing the check before you've even earned the money, and that, my friends, is a recipe for mediocrity. Let me tell you about 2 types of satisfaction. There's the shallow satisfaction of telling people what you're going to do, and there's the deep satisfaction of having done it. One lasts for a moment, the other lasts a lifetime. Which one are you choosing? I've watched thousands of people over the years. The ones who talk the most about their future success usually achieve the least. It's like they're using up their success energy in conversation instead of conversion. Converting dreams into reality, that's what we're after. Here's another principle for your notes. Silence is not just golden, it's growth in disguise. When you're not talking about what you're doing, you're creating space for something magical to happen. You're allowing your ideas to mature, your plans to crystallize. your strategies to develop without the contamination of outside opinions. You know what's interesting about farming? A seed grows best in the dark, underneath the soil, where nobody can see it. It's only when it's strong enough, when it's developed its roots, when it's ready, that it breaks through the surface. Your dreams, your goals, your plans, they're like seeds. They need that darkness, that privacy, that period of unseen growth. I remember when I was building my first business, nobody knew what I was doing. My own family didn't even know the full extent of it. They just knew I was working hard. And you know what? That privacy gave me something precious, the space to fail without an audience, the freedom to adjust without explanation, and the ability to succeed without pressure. Let me tell you something else about success that most people don't understand. Success is shy. It doesn't come when you're calling it out loud. It comes when you're too busy working to call it at all. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. Years ago, I knew two men who started similar businesses at the same time. One of them, let's call him Tom, told everyone about his plans. He talked about it at parties, posted about it on social media, told anyone who would listen about how his business was going to revolutionize the industry. The other man, let's call him David, barely told anyone. When people asked what he was up to, he'd just smile and say he was working on a project. That's it. No details, no grand proclamations, no promises of revolution. 5 years later, guess which business was thriving? David's company had quietly grown to become a market leader, while Tom's business never made it past the planning stage. Why? Because Tom was selling the story while David was building the business. Now, here's something crucial I want you to understand about keeping quiet about your work. It's not about being secretive, it's about being strategic. It's not about hiding, it's about focusing. Big difference. Think about a battery. A battery doesn't announce how much power it has, it just powers things. That's what you want to be, not the one talking about power, but the one providing it. Let me give you another principle. The more you say, the more you have to prove. The less you say, the more you can improve. Write that down. It's worth its weight in gold. You see, when you tell people what you're doing, you create observers. When you stay quiet about what you're doing, you create wonderers. Observers look for mistakes. Wonderers look for results. Which would you rather have? Here's something else about keeping quiet about your work. It gives you the ultimate competitive advantage: invisibility. While your competition is busy telling everyone about their next move, you're busy making yours. While they're showing their cards, you're building your hand. I want you to think about something for a moment. Think about the last time you achieved something significant. I mean really significant. Did the achievement happen while you were talking about it or while you were working on it? The answer's obvious, isn't it? You see, success is like a delicate piece of art. The more you handle it before it's finished, the more likely you are to damage it. Every time you talk about your unfinished work, your incomplete projects, your future plans, you're handling that delicate piece of art before it's ready. Let me share another powerful principle with you. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. When you're not busy telling people what you're doing, you can hear opportunities knocking. You can hear the subtle shifts in the market. You can hear what people really need, not just what they say they want. I learned this lesson from a mentor of mine years ago. He told me, Jim, if you're doing all the talking, you're doing all the giving away. But if you're doing all the listening, you're doing all the gaining. Isn't that fascinating? Think about the great achievers in history. Did Thomas Edison announce he was going to invent the light bulb? Did Henry Ford tell everyone he was going to revolutionize the automobile industry? No, they just did it. They let their work do the talking. Here's another interesting thing about keeping quiet about your work. It helps you stay flexible. When you haven't told everyone what you're going to do, you can adjust your plans without explanation. You can pivot without permission. You can change direction without announcement. I want you to imagine success like a garden. Every time you talk about what you're going to grow, it's like inviting birds to come and eat your seeds before they've had a chance to sprout. But when you quietly plant, quietly tend, quietly nurture, that's when your garden has the best chance to flourish. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Jim, what about building anticipation? What about creating buzz? And these are good questions. But let me ask you something. Would you rather create buzz, or would you rather create results? Because here's the truth about buzz. It's like a sugar high. It feels good for a moment, but it doesn't sustain you. Results, on the other hand, they're like protein. They give you lasting energy, lasting credibility, lasting success. Let me tell you about something powerful that happens when you stop telling people what you do. Your identity starts to shift. You move from being someone who talks about success to someone who creates success. And that shift, my friends, is worth more than gold. Success leaves clues, but so does failure. And one of the biggest clues of failure is excessive talking about future achievements. You see, most people are living in two time zones. They're either talking about what they're going to do tomorrow or what they did yesterday. But success lives in today, in this moment, what you're doing right now. Here's a principle I want you to understand. Your work should be so loud that you don't need to say a word. Think about that. When your work speaks for itself, you don't have to explain it, defend it, or promote it. It promotes itself. I remember a time when I was beginning my journey. I had two choices. I could either tell people about the fortune I was going to make, or I could go out and make it. I chose the latter. And you know, it's fascinating. The less I talked about what I was doing, the more I actually got done. Let me share something profound with you about human nature. People don't believe what you tell them, they believe what you show them. They don't believe your words, they believe your results. Isn't that interesting? All the talking in the world can't match one solid result. Here's another principle. Success is attracted to silence. Money is attracted to silence. Opportunities are attracted to silence. When you're quiet about your moves, you become like a magnet for success. Why? Because you're putting all your energy into attraction rather than announcement. Think about the ocean for a moment. The surface can be noisy, full of waves and commotion. But where does all the wealth lie? Deep below, in the quiet depths. Your success works the same way. The deeper and quieter you go, the more valuable what you find becomes. Now let me tell you about three types of people in the world. The first type talks about what they're going to do. The second type talks about what others are doing. The third type is too busy doing it to talk about it. Which type are you? You see, when you stop telling people what you do, something magical happens. You start doing more than you ever thought possible. Why? Because you're not spending energy defending your plans, you're spending it executing them. Let me share another principle with you. The size of your success is determined by the size of your silence. The bigger your dreams, the quieter you should be about them. Write that down. It's worth remembering. I've watched people destroy their chances of success simply by talking too much about it. They leak their energy, their enthusiasm, their power through their words. Don't let that be you. Be the one who shows up with results, not announcements. Here's something fascinating about success. It's like a cat. The more you call it, the less likely it is to come. But go about your business quietly, focused on your work, and watch how it starts to curl up right next to you. You know what's interesting about the most successful people I've met? They never had to tell me they were successful. I could see it in their results, in their bearing, in their quiet confidence. They didn't need to announce their success announced itself. Let me give you another principle. The more you achieve, the less you need to say. Think about that. Real achievement gives you the luxury of silence. When you're truly successful, you don't need to tell people, they'll tell you. I want you to try something. The next time someone asks you what you do, instead of launching into a detailed explanation, just smile and say, I help people, or I solve problems. Watch what happens. Watch how their curiosity grows. Watch how they lean in, wanting to know more. You see, mystery creates magnetism. When you don't lay all your cards on the table, people become interested in your game. But here's the key. You're not being mysterious to create interest. You're being mysterious because you're too focused on your work to explain it. Let me tell you about something that happens when you master the art of keeping quiet about your work. You develop what I call success gravity. Just like the Earth's gravity pulls objects toward it without making a sound, your success starts pulling opportunities toward you without you having to announce them. You know what's fascinating about gravity? It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't try to convince you of its power. It just works silently, consistently, powerfully. That's how your success should be. Here's another principle. The quieter you become, the higher you'll climb. Think about mountain climbers. The ones who make it to the top aren't the ones talking about making it to the top. They're the ones focusing on each step, each handhold, each moment of the climb. I want to share something powerful with you about silence and wealth. Wealth is attracted to people who understand the power of discretion. It's like a wild animal that runs from noise but is drawn to quiet strength. You see, there are two types of wealth. There's loud wealth and quiet wealth. Loud wealth is like a firecracker, lots of noise, bright flash going in an instant. Quiet wealth is like a coal mine, no flash, no noise, but deep and lasting value. Let me tell you about something I noticed years ago. The people who were always talking about becoming millionaires rarely became millionaires. But the ones who quietly went about their business, focused on creating value, solving problems, they're the ones who built lasting wealth. Here's another principle worth writing down. Your silence builds your strength. Every time you resist the urge to talk about your plans, you're building your success muscles. Every time you choose to work instead of talk about working, you're getting stronger. Think about a tree for a moment. Does it announce that it's growing? Does it tell everyone about how tall it's going to be? No, it just grows. Day by day, season by season, year by year. And one day people look up and say, when did that tree get so tall? That's how your success should be. People should look up one day and say, when did they become so successful? Not because you told them it was coming, but because you were too busy making it happen to tell them about it. Now, let me share something crucial about the relationship between silence and opportunity. Opportunities are like cats. They run from those who chase them, but are attracted to those who ignore them. When you're quietly focused on your work, opportunities have a way of finding you. Here's what I want you to understand about success. It's not a proclamation, it's an accumulation. It's not about what you say you'll do tomorrow. It's about what you did today and yesterday and the day before that. Let me give you one final principle. The depth of your success is determined by the depth of your silence. The more you can work without needing to talk about it, the deeper your success will become. You see, most people are trying to build their success from the outside in, through talking, through showing, through telling. But real success is built from the inside out, through working, through focusing, through doing. I want you to make a decision today. A decision to become a person of action rather than announcement. A decision to let your work speak louder than your words. A decision to build your success in silence. Because here's the truth, and write this down, it's important. The world doesn't need to hear about what you're going to do. The world needs to see what you've done. Think about that for a moment. The world doesn't need your announcements. It needs your achievements. It doesn't need your promises. It needs your results. And here's the beautiful thing about choosing silence. When you finally do achieve what you've been working toward, you won't have to tell anyone. They'll tell you. Your success will speak for itself, and its voice will be louder than any announcement you could have made. Remember this. The biggest dreams don't need announcements. They need commitment. They need focus. They need action. And all of these things happen in silence. So starting today, make this commitment to yourself. Commit to being the person who shows up with results, not announcements. Commit to being the person who works while others talk. Commit to being the person who builds their success in silence. Because in the end, success isn't about what you say you'll do. It's about what you've done. And when you've truly done something remarkable, you won't need to tell anyone. They'll tell you. That's the power of never telling people what you do. That's the power of silent success. That's the power that can change your life forever. Thank you, and remember, your next achievement is waiting in your silence. Go find it.